The story of Annabelle is one of the most famous in modern paranormal history. It's been told dozens of times, reshaped, adapted, exaggerated. What you're about to hear isn't invented, but it isn't verifiable either, not by any independent source. Everything we know comes from one couple, Ed and Lorraine Warren. And while their sincerity convinced thousands of people, it's also been questioned, repeatedly. So this video won't tell you what to believe. It isn't trying to prove anything. It simply goes back over what the Warrens said, what they passed on, and what that doll they called Annabelle came to mean. 1970, Hartford, Connecticut. Donna is 24, a nursing student, sharing a small apartment with her friend Angie, who's studying nursing too. Two quiet young women, serious, focused on their exams, living somewhere modest but good enough. 2 bedrooms, a cramped living room, a functional kitchen. Nothing about their lives stood out. Nothing at all. Until the day when so slowly they barely noticed, everything started to crack. It began with a present. For her birthday, Donna's mother gave her a rag doll she'd found in an antique shop, a Raggedy Ann. Round hand-stitched face, red cheeks, yarn hair. Something from another time, a little worn, vaguely sweet. Donna was touched. She brought it back to the apartment and put it on her bed without thinking twice. It wasn't a passion. It wasn't an obsession. Just a gift from someone who loved her, left in a corner, barely noticed. For several days, nothing happened. Then came the small doubts, subtle, almost ridiculous. An arm that seemed to be turned differently, legs that had shifted, an impression, nothing more. And yet, every morning, Donna would arrange the doll the same way, arms down at its sides, legs straight. And every evening when she came home, it had changed. Limbs moved, crossed, folded. At first, she thought Angie was messing with her, but Angie said no. So they decided to test it. One morning, Donna crossed the doll's arms and legs herself, deliberately, and when she came back, everything had been uncrossed. The doll hadn't left the bed, but it had moved. Over the following days, it wasn't the positions anymore. It was the location. She'd leave the doll in her bedroom and find it in the living room, sometimes sitting cross-legged on the sofa, sometimes propped against a chair, sometimes kneeling, facing the front door. One day they found it lying on Angie's bed, its head turned toward the window, like it was watching the street. Everything was locked. Nobody was supposed to come in, and the doll kept moving. That's when they decided to tell Lou. Lou was a close friend. He came round often. He knew both of them well. And the first time he saw the doll, his face changed completely. He said he felt something in its presence, something wrong, a kind of low, spreading unease, like something deeply bad was coming off an object that looked completely harmless. He told them to get rid of it. But Donna wasn't superstitious. Angie was still laughing about it nervously. They wanted to understand it, not run from it. Then the note started. Small pieces of paper, yellowed, like scraps of parchment, turning up around the apartment. And on each one, a message, scrawled, childlike, in pencil. Help us. Or more disturbing still, help Lou. They'd never seen that paper before. They didn't own anything like it. No pencils like that either. They went through every drawer, turned the apartment upside down. Nothing matched. And why Lou? Lou had nothing to do with the doll, not directly. They started to wonder if someone was getting into the apartment while they were out. So they set traps, small objects placed in exact positions, discrete markers, threads, and nothing was ever disturbed. Nobody was coming in. And still, the doll kept turning up somewhere new, like something was carrying it. But it hadn't tipped into fear yet, because so far, whatever this was, it seemed almost kind. One morning they found a small chocolate ball, carefully placed on the stereo. Neither of them had bought it. They actually smiled about it. Maybe, they thought, it's a gentle spirit. Maybe it just wants our attention. Maybe there's nothing evil here at all. That illusion didn't last long. One evening while they were talking in the living room, a statuette flew across the room, fast. It hit the floor inches from Donna. Neither of them was anywhere near it. There was no draft, nothing shook. Just that violent, impossible movement. That was the first real fear. And not long after Donna came home alone, she found the doll in her bedroom, like usual. But this time something was wrong. She went closer, and she saw the stains. Red, dark. 3 distinct drops on its chest, and 1 on the back of its left hand. It wasn't paint. It wasn't dye bleeding through the fabric. It looked like blood. That was enough. They called a medium. A man in his 50s used to dealing with what he called wandering spirits. He came. He looked at the doll for a long time, and then he explained very calmly what he was picking up. The doll, he said, was inhabited by the spirit of a young girl who died tragically on that land, years before, long before the building went up. Her name was Annabelle Higgins, and through the doll, she was simply trying to communicate. She just didn't want to be forgotten. Donna and Angie were moved, genuinely moved. They accepted the idea. They welcomed her in. They decided to let her stay. They thought they'd understood. But what they'd just opened was far darker than a lost little girl. The atmosphere in the apartment changed after that. Since the seance, Donna and Angie had been calmer. They'd cried. They'd prayed. They'd found meaning in something that had made no sense at all. A child who died in terrible circumstances. Annabelle Higgins. Her name, her age, her story. It had all seemed so clear, so sad, so human. So they started calling the doll Annabelle, as if a name was enough to give a soul to something made of cloth. Donna talked to it out loud sometimes. They made a place for it in the living room. One evening, Angie put a blanket over its legs, the way you'd cover a sleeping child. But Lou wasn't buying any of it. He didn't believe the story about the little girl. Not for a second. Every time he came into that apartment, his eyes went to the doll with the same instinctive distrust. He said this wasn't a toy with a child in it. He said it was a container, an open door, an invitation for something else. He begged them to get rid of it. Donna refused, flat out. She'd become attached. She said she felt responsible for what she now called the little one. To her, throwing Annabelle away was like throwing a child out onto the street. Lou stopped arguing, but the fear had got into him, a dull, persistent fear, and it didn't take long before it took shape. One night, sleeping alone in one of the bedrooms, Lou woke up with his heart hammering. He hadn't been dreaming. He knew that. There was something in the room. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling. Then he turned his head, slowly, and he stopped. The doll was at the foot of the bed. It hadn't been there when he came in. Nobody had put it there. It shouldn't have been there, at all. He tried to sit up. His body wouldn't move. He was pinned to the mattress, held down by something he couldn't see. And then, the doll started to move, onto his legs first, then his chest. And there it stopped, right over his heart. Its cloth arms came up, one on each side of his neck, and it squeezed. Lou felt the pressure, real, physical. His breath jammed in his throat. He tried to shout, tried to push it off, and his arms wouldn't obey him. His lungs were burning. And then nothing. He passed out. He woke the next morning drenched in sweat, gasping. The doll was gone. But he had no doubt. That was not a dream. What happened to him was real. He was certain of it. And he understood what it had been telling him. Shut up. Stay out of it. Or you'll be next. But Lou didn't back off. The next evening, Donna was out. Lou and Angie were in the living room, working over some maps. They were planning a short trip. Nothing unusual. Until a dull sound came from Donna's bedroom. A knock. A rustle. Like something being moved. Angie froze. Did you hear that? Lou nodded. He got up without a sound, shoulders tight, watching the door. He crossed the room, turned the handle slowly, and hit the light switch all at once. Nobody. The room was empty. But there, on the floor in the corner, Annabelle was waiting. Lou stepped forward. Something was wrong. There was a pressure building at the back of his neck, a strange heat running down his spine. He turned round. Nothing. And then he screamed. A short, torn-out scream. He went down backwards, doubled over. Angie ran in. His shirt was soaked with blood. They got him into the living room, and when she peeled the fabric back, she went white. 7 marks. 4 long horizontal gouges deep, and 3 finer vertical cuts, like a hand with claws had gone across his chest. He was bleeding. He was shaking. His face had gone the color of ash. And those wounds, as clean and deep as they were, disappeared almost as fast as they'd appeared. Half of them had scabbed over by the next day. 2 days later, there was nothing left at all. But nothing had gone from their minds. The fear had taken root, and it couldn't be ignored anymore. Donna and Angie went to someone they trusted, Father Higgins, a priest they'd known a long time. They expected to be laughed at. They dreaded the look on his face. But he listened, carefully. He never once smiled. He spoke gently, weighing every word. He admitted he'd never dealt with anything like this. But what they were describing, he said, wasn't nothing. This wasn't grief. This wasn't an obsession. This was something deeper and darker. He promised to talk to a more experienced priest, Father Cook. A few days later, Father Cook heard the whole thing, and he didn't jump to conclusions either, but he knew who to call. He got in touch with 2 investigators who specialized in demonic phenomena, a couple known across the country, Ed and Lorraine Warren, and their arrival changed everything, because what Donna, Angie, and Lou still thought was a haunting was about to turn out to be something else entirely. They came on an afternoon in May, barely a week after the attack. Ed was an imposing man, and he arrived at that door with a serious face. Lorraine was quieter, glancing around, taking in every detail. The moment they stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. An unusual silence settled over the apartment, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Donna and Angie sat side by side on the sofa, nervous. Lou stood by the window, avoiding looking at the doll in its usual place on the armchair. The Warrens sat down opposite them, and Ed asked to hear the whole story from the beginning. He didn't interrupt anyone, but as it came out, the doll moving, the notes, the wounds, the night attack, his face closed. And when Donna got to the medium and the little girl called Annabelle Higgins, his jaw tightened. Then he cut her off. "First of all," he said, "there is no Annabelle. There never was." Donna tried to answer. He raised a hand. "You've been deceived. What you let in here isn't a little girl. It isn't a ghost. It's something else. And it's far more dangerous." He glanced at the doll. Lorraine, who hadn't said anything, looked down, like being in the same room as it made her uncomfortable. "The doll moving from room to room," Ed said. "The handwritten notes, the blood on its chest, the precision of it, all of that tells you one thing. There's an intelligence behind this, a will, but it isn't human." Lou stepped forward. "I always said it. That thing is inhabited. It's not a kind spirit. I tried to warn them. They wouldn't listen." Donna admitted, a little ashamed, that hearing the medium's story had softened her. They'd thought they were doing the right thing, taking in a lost soul, a child who died young. She hadn't seen it coming. And then Lorraine spoke, calm but firm. "There was never a little girl. No child spirit manifests like this. These phenomena aren't within the capabilities of a human spirit, not even a lost one." Both women went pale. The truth was assembling itself in front of them, and it was much worse than anything they'd imagined. "The doll isn't possessed," Ed said. "An entity used this doll as an anchor point. It used it to manipulate you, to earn your trust. And now, it has you." He paused. Then he turned to Lou. "That attack wasn't random. You were the one who doubted, the one who resisted. It wanted you silenced, and if it had been given more time, it would have taken one of you completely. It would have gone for full possession, and it would have ended in a death." The room went silent. "Inhuman spirits," Ed went on, "can't do anything without your permission, and you gave it, by believing its story, by letting it stay, by giving it a name. You opened the door. Nobody said anything. Then Donna tried one last thing. What if we move out? What if we leave this apartment? Ed looked at her for a long moment, almost with pity. You can't run from this. It isn't the apartment that's infested. It's you. There had to be a blessing, an exorcism. Nothing else would do. Donna and Angie didn't argue. They were terrified. They didn't have a choice anymore. Ed offered to contact Father Cook, the priest who'd sent them. A cautious man, not used to this kind of case, but Ed was hoping he'd cooperate. The next day, the Warrens went to see him, and Ed laid it all out. Where the phenomena started, the false identity, the escalation, the attack on Lou, the nature of what he believed they were dealing with. What you have here, Father, isn't a human soul. It's an inhuman spirit, a demon. These things always follow the same pattern. They come in quietly. That's infestation. Then the signs get stronger. They generate fear. And then they try to get into a person. The priest was quiet for a while. Then he nodded. If you'll guide me, I'll perform the blessing. The ceremony happened a few days later. Father Cook read the sacred texts aloud, blessed every room with holy water, traced crosses on the walls, called down protection. Lorraine kept her eyes closed, concentrating, like she could feel the smallest movement in the air. Nothing dramatic happened during the ritual, but everyone in that apartment felt it, that tension, that low unease that hadn't left the place in weeks. At the end, the priest blessed the three of them as well, Donna, Angie, Lou, and then Ed and Lorraine. He told them the spirit had no hold on them anymore. But there was one thing left. Donna never wanted to see that doll again. She was frightened of it. She said she could feel that it wasn't empty. So she asked Ed to take it. He agreed. He picked Annabelle up carefully, the way you'd handle something toxic. He didn't say anything, but you could see it in his face. He knew this wasn't over. They left that afternoon. Father Cook, calm as he seemed, had admitted something to them before they went. He wasn't sure the blessing had been enough. He'd felt something dense, something that hadn't let go. So before they drove off with the doll, he gave them a piece of advice, almost a warning. Don't take the highway. Ed nodded. His face was drawn. He picked up the doll, wrapped it in a cloth, and handed it to Lorraine. She settled it on the back seat, and then, carefully, she fastened the seatbelt around its cloth body, as if that could hold in whatever this was. Ed took the wheel. He'd already decided to stay off the fast roads. He didn't need anyone to confirm it. He could feel it too. Something was still traveling with that doll. The drive home was slow, winding, and tense at every turn. The brakes started responding late, a fraction of a second, but late. More than once, the steering locked briefly, like something was pushing back against the movement of the car. The roads there are narrow, pines on both sides, ditches. Any one of those moments could have killed them. Ed kept going. He refused to panic. He could have opened the door and thrown Annabelle into the woods. It would have taken 2 seconds. He didn't, because leaving it out there alone meant it could come back, or worse, it could choose somebody else, at random. And then the car stopped dead. No reason. The engine just stopped responding. Lorraine went very quiet, staring at the back seat, like she could see something the rest of them couldn't. Ed reached for his bag. He took out a small bottle of holy water and sprinkled the doll, slowly, saying a prayer over it. The second he finished, the engine started. The rest of the drive was calm, nothing else happened. But that feeling of having brushed up against something deep, something that meant harm, stayed with them the whole way. Back home, the Warrens didn't lock Annabelle away straight off. Ed put it on a chair in his office. He thought he'd learn more by watching it. At first, it barely moved. He'd find it slightly shifted now and then, like something had nudged it. Then it escalated. One morning, he found it on the floor, when he was certain he'd left it on the chair. Another time, it was gone from the office entirely. They found it in the living room, sitting, in exactly the place it used to occupy at Donna's. Lorraine, more on edge than ever, started feeling a cold presence in certain rooms. And then something strange started happening. A black cat would appear near the doll, silent. It would walk slowly round the room, stop in front of the shelves, come back to Annabelle, and then it would be gone, like it had never been there at all. Lorraine watched this without saying anything, but she had no doubts left. One evening with Ed out, she was alone in the house, and the growling started, low, guttural, inhuman, coming from every room at once. She froze. There were no animals in that house. When she checked the answering machine later, there were 2 missed calls, both from Ed. The growling had happened in the gap between them, exactly. Another day, a Catholic exorcist the Warrens knew well came to visit, Father Jason Bradford. He was curious. He asked Ed to show him the doll. Ed did, and the priest looked at it for a long moment. Then he picked it up in his hands with something close to a smirk. "You're just a rag doll," he said. "You can't hurt anyone." And he tossed it onto a chair. Ed didn't react, but his voice was serious when he answered. "That wasn't a good idea, Father." Lorraine was uneasy enough to make the priest promise to call when he got home. The call came late that night, and his voice was shaking. His car had been destroyed at an intersection. The brakes had failed. He'd survived. Barely. Others in that crash weren't so lucky. A few weeks later, at a gathering at the Warrens' house, Father Jason came back. He was talking quietly with Lorraine in a side room, the room Annabelle had been moved into the day before. And in the middle of that conversation, a piece of wall decoration moved on its own. Then a necklace of boar's teeth hanging on a shelf violently exploded. The noise brought the other guests running. One of them took a photograph. When it was developed, everything looked normal, except for 2 points of light, directly above the doll, angled toward Father Jason. And it wasn't only priests. One day, a police investigator came to talk to Ed about a murder connected to occult practice. He ended up alone in the office for a few minutes. Ed had warned him, "Don't touch anything." A few minutes later, the man came up the stairs white as a sheet, repeating the same sentence over and over. "The doll, the rag doll, it's alive." He refused to set foot in that room again. That was when Ed and Lorraine understood that Annabelle couldn't stay loose. They built a wooden case, sealed it, fitted it with thick glass, and they put it in their occult museum, and they fixed a sign to the front of it. Warning, positively do not open. She's never left that case since, but that hasn't stopped anything. Visitors claimed to see her move. Others said they heard growling. A legend grew up around her. And one day, a young man came in with his girlfriend and started mocking her, openly, taunting the doll, laughing. Ed threw them out immediately. They left on a motorcycle. A few miles down the road, the young man lost control of it. He was killed. Instantly. His girlfriend survived, but she spent a long time in hospital. Years later, filming inside the museum, Lorraine Warren walked a television crew through the shelves of cursed objects. She stopped in front of Annabelle's case, and she didn't look at it. "That's the most terrifying object in this museum," she said quietly. "I'm not going to look at her. You can film her if you want, but I won't put my eyes on her again." The house in Monroe is quieter now than it's ever been. Ed Warren died in 2006, Lorraine in 2019, and the corridors down to the museum seem to be in mourning too. Nobody goes down to light the candles in front of the dangerous objects anymore. No visitor meets Ed's eye while he warns them, firmly but calmly, that this isn't a collection. It's a warning. The museum closed shortly after Lorraine's death. It was no longer a question of letting the curious in, or even the enthusiasts. Too much danger, too much responsibility, and a promise to keep. Never let these objects leave their glass. The society the Warrens founded carried on managing what they left behind. Their daughter Judy and her husband Tony took over quietly. They preserved the archives, the testimonies, the objects, and above all, they kept watching the doll. She was still there behind the glass, in the same wooden case, with the same sign nailed to the frame. But the world around her had changed. The Conjuring films pushed her name into the collective imagination. She became one of the most recognizable figures in modern paranormal culture. Quoted on forums, discussed on podcasts, turned into memes, and even though the real doll looks nothing like the Hollywood version, no porcelain face, no frozen grin, just a soft, naive body made of cloth. The unease stayed exactly the same. Sometimes at public events, Annabelle was brought out briefly, always in her case, always under guard, and those rare appearances were enough to set the fascination going again. People filmed her from a distance. Some of them prayed as they got closer. Others ran live streams, where the view counts exploded. Because she fascinates people. She sits on that blurred line between a toy and something sacred, between childhood and terror. She'd become a mirror for our obsessions. Film everything, share everything, strip everything of its meaning. And yet the people who got close to her still felt it. Something different, a presence, a tension. Tony Spera never smiled when he talked about her. He'd repeat what Ed used to say. This isn't a toy. This isn't a story. It's a reminder of what's out there. And today, she's still there. Behind glass, inert, silent. But her name keeps coming back. On TikTok, people claim to have seen her blink. Others say they heard voices while filming her case. A few months ago, a public appearance in Louisiana set off a wave of rumors nobody could control. That same night, a fire tore through an old plantation house nearby, and viral videos immediately suggested Annabelle had cursed the place. The authorities denied it flatly, electrical fault, no connection, and the society confirmed the doll had never left her protective case. But beliefs are hard to kill, especially when they're attached to an object that, for more than 50 years, has stood for something quiet and patient and evil, wearing a completely harmless face. And then, on the 13th of July, 2025, Dan Rivera died. He was 54. He was the doll's last keeper. He'd been the one to move her, protect her, explain her to visitors without ever passing judgment. He was found alone in a hotel room in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, the morning after an event on tour with her. The coroner was clear. Nothing suspicious. The doll wasn't at the scene. Discreet, respectful. He'd never sought the spotlight, and he never said what he really felt, alone with her, on the evenings when the museum was empty. Now they're all gone. The Warrens, Dan, Father Cook, Father Jason, and she's still there, behind reinforced glass, with a yellowed sign standing in front of her. Warning, positively, do not open.